Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another installment of the Sweet Nothings podcast, or to your first installment, depending on, if it's your first one or not. Only you can answer that. This, if you're new here, is your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats all about the love of eating. We'll talk about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and all things edible. If you are new here, or if you've forgotten, my name is Kelly. I post lots of recipes and foodie content at Maverick Baking on just about every social media content platform available, except MySpace if it's still up. And you can find me there if you're into that kind of thing. But today, folks, I want to strip back all of the kind of foodie chefiness. I want to take things back to basics, and I want to talk about our favorite budget meals. Not only because I haven't quite reached payday yet this month, and not only just align my own recipe box with ideas for when things are looking a little bit skint, but because I know that the crisis that many of us find ourselves in just now means that cooking might not be a number one priority. Treating yourself to delicious meals might not be a number one priority. And I want to talk about things that are both, nourishing and sustaining, that don't cost the earth, basically, or things you can batch cook, things you can make to cheer yourself up if life isn't quite the way you'd like it to be at the moment. But before we do that, let's instead talk about the absolute insanity of the super wealthy instead. This didn't mean to get quite so political so quickly, but here we are. I'm here to whisper sweet nothings in your ear and let you know the state of global financial policy. No, I'm joking. Let's talk about Gwyneth Paltrow. It is Easter Monday as I record this. We had a little bit of a skip last month. I didn't kind of post in the usual time frame, which means that I am probably weeks late to talk about this, but I couldn't not talk about this. Gwyneth Paltrow and her quote unquote wellness routine. If you are on TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook video, any kind of vertical video platform, even YouTube Shorts, you will probably have come across that clip of Gwyneth Paltrow, the goddess of insane food and life practices, talking and answering questions on a podcast about her wellness routine. Now, this will have been clipped and edited and posted for the exact purpose that it managed to achieve. Outrage and shock, I imagine. She's a genius marketer, she always has been, and she's reinvented herself many times in her life. But let's talk about it. This wellness routine it goes beyond, even what you would expect from the most privileged of influencers. And I say that as someone who many would probably consider a privileged influencer type. It's not just waking up and drinking lemon water or liquids mixed with greens powders and then going about a day that involves no actual labor of any sort. Her wellness routine is essentially an entirely liquid diet, and none of the liquids even sound particularly appetizing. It's wake up, have some water, have some juice, do something like that. Lunch was like bone broth. She loves an IV, like a vitamins introduced into her system, not by food, the normal, delicious, enjoyable, and nourishing way that most of us get vitamins and minerals into our system, but through an IV, through an intravenous injection directly into her bloodstream. I feel like that doesn't even need to be commented on. It says everything it needs to say about itself, And, then her dinner was going to be something like basically vegetables. And of course, it's the diet. There are prisoners who will have eaten better than this. Most prisoners today probably eat better than that. It's insane, but it's very Gwyneth Paltrow. The only thing I would say is obviously if you are hugely triggered, if you are thrown off course by things like that, I would really encourage you to take everything there said with a pinch of salt. This is not a normal person living a normal life on a normal budget and a normal routine. Yes, she has 2 children and she's a grown woman who runs 1 to however many other businesses. However, it's not reflective of reality of life. if you eat carbohydrates and meat, you will not drop dead. You you will not start to look like some kind of ogre. You will probably be a lot healthier, and probably a lot happier than she is. But I just had to bring this up because in terms of food trends and foodie things occurring on social media, it's been, of course, a very highly spoken about thing this month, as have the somewhat unhinged water. This is going to sound as ridiculous as it is. Water TikTok. Let me explain. There are people on TikTok, usually middle class women, who are kind of showing you what they flavor their water with. So instead of just having bottles of water or glasses of water, because they're at home most of the time, they'll have a collection of these, super popular at the moment, fashionable Stanley Cup things, the portable cup mugs that I think are horrendously ugly, but they come in lots of different matte pastel shades, so they have the influencer girlies in a death grip. Um, and they're basically filling these, maybe half a litre of water goes into each one, maybe even up to 750 mils to a litre of water you can fit in these huge cups. They remind me a lot of the kind of like the big gulp things or whatever they're called from 7-Eleven in the US. They're just in irrationally large quantities of water. And instead of just drinking water, or maybe, even getting creative and putting some fruit in, a couple of slices of lemon, some cucumber, gin, whatever the day calls for, they're putting in like pumps of sugar-free syrup, like cocktail syrup or coffee syrup, into their water and drinking it and making these like flavor mixes. It's very much giving the Starbucks secret menu Pinterest posts you would have seen, 5-10 years ago. These girls will be like, oh, this one tastes just like, gummy bears. You add like 2 pumps of peach syrup and a little bit of raspberry syrup, to the point where you wish they would just chug half a litre of orange juice and be done with it. But it's been a real big thing, or at least it's been a big thing for a while, and I've only kind of come across it this month. But yeah, get hydrated, drink your water. Absolutely. Just, I don't know how necessary the syrups and the designer portable cups are in the whole process. In terms of food news, the UK, as usual, is losing its mind. Of course, I'm recording this and speaking to you from Italy, and I know not everyone is listening from the UK, but the UK, the UK food industry is losing its rag so far over the past couple of months. Obviously, we've just passed Easter. As I say, I'm recording this on Easter Monday. And the biggest kind of Easter controversy food stuff has to be the fact that Heinz produced a limited number of jars of hot cross bun flavored mayonnaise. If you're listening from outside of the UK, a hot cross bun is our kind of traditional Easter sweet bread. In Italy, they have the colomba. In other parts of the world, they'll have other desserts or sweet things or bread or treats that they make to celebrate the Easter period. We have the hot cross bun. They're individual buns with a kind of flour paste that's piped over the top in the shape of a cross before baking. They're delicious. They have usually orange peel, usually sultanas and raisins, a little bit of cinnamon in there. They're delicious. They're absolutely gorgeous. However, already I'm always a little bit, eye twitchy about the fact that there are so many thousands of versions of the hot cross bun these days. You'll find savory ones, you'll find versions with, banoffee and salted caramel, chocolate chunk, blueberry, all of these things that really take away from the fact that a hot cross bun is a very specific set of flavors and textures. But without wanting to sound like an angry uncle, I'm most perturbed by this hot cross bun mayonnaise. If someone said hot cross bun butter, I'm fully on board. If someone had added the spices and the fruits to make a kind of compound butter, fabulous idea. If someone had even made a hot cross bun olive oil, I could be convinced. But hot cross bun mayonnaise, that combination of vegetable oil and eggs and vinegar, then having spices and fruit added to it is just deeply unsettling. And of course, Heinz are making it as like stunt food, PR food, because it gets lots of clicks and comments and engagements online. And that's very dystopian and a whole different conversation in itself. But at least make it something that's, appetizing in its ridiculousness. I think they only made like 1,000 jars or something like that. So thankfully it won't be around in human memory for very long. Similarly, if you've listened to a few podcast episodes before, especially from a year or so ago, you might know that the Sweet Nothings podcast has personal beef with the Marks and Spencer's Colin the Caterpillar cake. Not the actual cake itself, because it's fine. It's a standard kid's birthday party chocolate cake, and it tastes all right, as kids' birthday party chocolate cakes go. But this all started when we first kind of got into the issues between M&S and Aldi and M&S and other supermarkets for trying to recreate the Colin the Caterpillar. And M&S just have this really, really bizarre obsession with the kind of 2 or 3 food names that they've created. One, of course, being the Percy Pigs, which you can get in every form. Percy Pig is available in every single kind of product mankind has ever considered, let alone made. And the Colin the Caterpillar is kind of becoming like this as well. It was a kid's birthday cake. It's a log-shaped chocolate cake with a caterpillar face stuck on the end, and probably some caterpillar feet these days as well. They've released ridiculous versions of this in the past. For Easter, though M&S have released lots of other, delicious looking Easter products, they've released an Easter version of the Colin the Caterpillar, 2 in fact. One has a chocolate egg cracked on his back. That is laziness at its peak. It makes no sense that a caterpillar would even be big enough to have an egg cracked on its back, right? Even for kids, it's absurd. And the second, even more disturbingly, they've decided to just use the same mold, the same cake shape, but instead of having a caterpillar face on the front, it's like the face of a cartoon chicken. And they've given it chicken feet. Not 2 chicken feet, which an actual chicken would have, nor the hundreds of feet or however many feet a caterpillar has. 4 chicken's feet. Imagine a chocolate cake shaped like a caterpillar, but it's got a chicken's face at one end and 4 chicken feet. Why? How did it get through so many different levels of PR before being created and released? Why does it look the way it looks? Why did it have to be a chicken? Why wasn't it a rabbit? Why didn't you just make any other chocolate animal? Why does Colin the Caterpillar, the poor bastard, have to be Madonna-fied and reborn in some new form every few years? The poor thing. And the other thing that I simply must talk about in terms of the food news, in terms of what's been happening in new UK releases this month, because of the coronation of King Charles upcoming, I believe, in the first week of May, I believe. There are, of course, there's some money to be made in cashing in on some coronation food products. Now, when Queen Elizabeth was crowned, a very famous and still much loved foodstuff to this day was introduced and created at the kind of celebration banquet. This was the coronation chicken. A chicken served cold or warm, I think usually cold more so nowadays, that's in a kind of creamy Indian style curry sauce, sometimes with flaked almonds and raisins, but it's just a creamy chicken curry stuff. It's delicious. It's great in sandwiches and baked potatoes on its own, whatever. Something new was created for the coronation, right? Because it was a new monarch being crowned. Instead, this time, most of the products being released for this coronation are either something that is coronation chicken flavored or a newly packaged product that already exists. For example, we've seen from Heck coronation chicken sausages. From Tyrrell's and from other brands, we've seen coronation chicken crisps. Stokes have released a coronation chicken sauce. There was another company that released I think Tiptree released a coronation chicken mayo. Fine. But these are all products that celebrate the food stuff that was invented for the last monarch, you know? Maybe I'm missing the point here, but that to me doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Similarly, brands such as Cadbury and Fry's, who I believe are owned by the same company, have just re-released their big chocolate bars and their classic chocolate bars, but on the front it just says something about the coronation has a crown on the front. I don't understand why you would go to the effort of the planning and the packaging and the rollout of all of this stuff if it's not even a new product. Like, the coronation chicken products are technically new products for these companies, but it's not a new thing, you know? And the Cadbury ones, for example, are just the same product as normal, just with a new piece of cardboard or plastic over the top. I don't understand. I really, really don't understand. But those are all of the kind of somewhat unhinged things that have been going on in terms of UK food and new UK products this month. So do with that information what you will. But aside from that, the insanity aside, let's talk instead about some budget friendly, affordable meals that we love. I'm not talking, for example, as I have done this week, some meals have been a handful of nuts and a couple of biscuits just because of time and cash constraints at the moment. No, I'm talking about the actual meals that fit into a nice, kind of wholesome, nourishing dinner that are affordable, that are budget friendly, that you're able to plan into your shopping, into your weekly menu. And I asked you guys, as I always do, I asked you guys on Instagram and on YouTube for your input. And of course, as you always do, you guys delivered. So I've included as many of your responses that weren't kind of doubled up as possible, as well as adding a few of my own. These might just serve as good talking points. They might serve as a little bit of inspiration for what to have for dinner as you're listening to this, or it might just kind of help us all see that things don't necessarily have to be completely doom and gloom when it comes to eating and cooking on a budget, even as people who love big, bold flavors and all things edible, Some common answers received, for example, were some British classics, such as the jacket potato or beans on toast. I love beans on toast, and I always have. Whether it's the big brand names or the own brand ones, beans on toast is so filling, it's so comforting, it's so quick, and you've got protein, you've got fiber, you've got fats in there, you've got carbs in there. It's a genuinely, not pretty, but good meal on a budget. It's a student classic for a reason, as is the jacket potato. The jacket potato obviously being somewhat more pricey in terms of the fact that you have to cook it, whether you do so in the oven or in the microwave, but it's one of the most filling things I think a human being can eat. If you have a jacket potato with like a good, or as we call it in my neck of the woods, a baked tatty, with a good generous amount of filling, whether it's cheese, baked beans, tuna mayonnaise, anything like that, it will me personally, keeps me full for like 2 business days. I don't know why. Even if it's not actually any, heavier or larger a portion of another foodstuff, a baked tatty, a jacket potato for me fills me up for ages. Another kind of British favourite that came up was the cheese toastie, and forgive me, but it is almost dinner time here, so I'm hungry anyway, but this brought actual mouth-watering vibes to me today. The cheese toastie, much like beans on toast, is so balanced in its kind of simplicity, but so tasty. And you can do it with the cheapest of cheeses or the fanciest, most expensive blend of cheeses that your budget can get to, and it's so good. The same with the bread. If you use super cheap, squidgy white bread or a slightly fancier bread that you buy or one that you make, it's so good. It's filling, it's tasty, it's satisfying, and it balances all the macronutrients you need. It just, I love, love, love a cheese toastie. Pairs really well with other things. It pairs really well with soup, or you can throw in some crisps there to make it more filling as well. It fits at any time of day. I'm just, super fan. You'll never talk me down from that one. Some other favorites were porridge, whether sweet or savory. Personally, I'm not a big kind of savory porridge gal, but I know that some people do like it savory with some herbs or some cheese in there, even with an egg, like a fried egg or a poached egg on top, is apparently a really good kind of combination of flavors and textures. Porridge doesn't fill me up for a long time, but it is nice and kind of filling in the moment, and it's a nice hot, warm meal for those kind of still chilly spring days as well. So I'm always personally a sweet porridge girl, always happy to add chocolate, peanut butter, nuts, fruit, anything I have handy to it to make it even more kind of sustaining. Um, but yeah, I guess there's a reason our farming ancestors eat it as much as they did. Another delicious sounding one that someone mentioned was a sausage leek and potato hash, basically made with like leftovers. If you have leftover potato or leek or sausages, you can make it into this lovely pan-fried crispy thing, which reminded me a lot of stovies. If you're not from Scotland or not from at least, some particular parts of Scotland, you may never have heard of stovies. It's essentially what you would make with any leftovers from the Sunday roast. So, for example, if you had any leftover potatoes and gravy and meat, you would burl and mix them all together, warm them up, and serve them as a meal on their own. Again, definitely not the prettiest. Very stodgy, very filling, but quick and very, very tasty. And that's kind of what this hash kind of reminds me of. Um, but we didn't only have some British foods mentioned in there. So for people listening or people who have commented or messaged me from other parts of the world or who love food from other parts of the world, we had some really, really delicious options there too. For example, someone just said beans and rice was a classic. I can't argue with that. Not commonly found everywhere in the world, but if you're somewhere that has an abundance of beans at a good price, this is a great one. The one time I've been fortunate enough to visit South America, it was a meal that we ate very often. And let me tell you, it will keep you going for hours. Beans and rice, absolutely. Good for you, filling, and so affordable too. Similarly with beans, someone put forward a bean quesadilla, which, to many people might sound a little bit fancy or a little bit, kind of dinner out kind of thing instead. But I guess with tortillas or wraps, a handful of cheese, and some beans and a little bit of seasoning, you do have a very affordable, filling, and tasty dinner there as well. Vegetable tacos, someone else said too, which again, with some tortillas or some, tiny little wraps and some veg that you season up, could be a really tasty way to eat without breaking the bank. Some other classics were fried rice or kind of leftover rice and vegetables, all pan fried and mixed together, or, cooking the veg and the rice separately and having them. It might not be as filling as it would be with meat, or with tofu or with nuts or with beans or other kinds of things, but as a way of getting some good wholesome ingredients into you and keeping budgets small. I mean, rice fits almost perfectly into any kind of budget friendly meal plan, so I can absolutely understand that one. We head to some slightly more Italian kind of inspired options from a few people who put forward pesto pasta, which in the UK is also a modern student classic. You can get jars of the green basil pesto, or even the kind of slightly fancier sun-dried tomato pesto, the red one. That with pasta is an absolute winner. Again, I could eat that 2 to 3 times a week with no problem. It's so fast. It's so easy to make. And again, really, really, really tasty for just being essentially two things mixed together. Similarly, someone said just any kind of vegetable that you can pair with pasta, and I guess with a little bit of olive oil or butter, you definitely have a meal there. Courgettes, peppers, tomatoes, even any veg really would fit quite well in there. A tuna, as in a tin tuna and tomato pasta, is another classic. I have that all of the time now here. It's a really, really good kind of balanced, filling and savory dinner to have. Or a tomato and cheese pasta, a basic kind of homemade tomato sauce, or even one that you would get out of a jar or a bottle with some cheese either mixed through or on top, is so tasty. a classic with kids and something that is definitely budget friendly and good, again, at any end of the spending spectrum. Whether you have cheap cheese and tomatoes or fancy cheese and tomatoes, it's still going to taste good, you know. Minestrone was another option put forward. I don't know whether that is the kind of slightly more rough tinned kind that we have in the UK, or an actual homemade minestrone, which, much like broth, vegetable soup, you know, there are many parts of the world that use up vegetables and grains and stock and make a meal for multiple people out of it for good reason, especially if it tastes good. Ramen was one that followed that, which I guess is, you know, a form of broth and vegetables and grains just from Far East Asia instead. Absolutely delicious. Not always cheap when you eat it out or when you order it in from a delivery service, but one that you can make at home pretty cheaply, I think. It's something I made a few times just with some packet noodles, you know, maybe a soft boiled egg, a little bit of veg on the side, or some herbs, even some dried spices and things like that. Really, really tasty and feels very fancy. It doesn't feel like you're depriving yourself, you know. Another few delicious kind of spiced options we have, for example, are chana masala or dal. Chana masala is a kind of onion, chickpea, and tomato curry, which is delicious. I've made it loads of times at home before, and I love ordering it from Indian restaurants too. It goes really well with rice or with bread, super, super filling, and you can make a really big batch of it for like nothing at all. Similarly with dal, which I believe is kind of similar, but well, a bit more flexible, and it's a lentil-based curry, which again you can eat kind of in the style of a soup, or you could eat it with rice, with bread, anything. Someone commented shakshuka, and I'm so glad they did because it's something I am desperate to make now. Shakshuka is, I believe it's North African, or Middle Eastern. It's a dish, if you've never had it before, that's kind of based around tomatoes and peppers and onions and spices that you then kind of all simmer together, and you crack eggs into it and cook them until they're just kind of cooked through but still soft, and then you just have at it with bread and also with a fork or with a spoon, obviously. Great balance of your proteins, your fats, your carbs, your vegetables too, which again could really easily be done with tinned tomatoes and really affordable veg such as onions. Delicious, absolutely delicious. Someone else put forward garlic bread. This one I love just in its simplicity, but absolutely could pass as a whole meal. And they pointed out that you can get a whole loaf of like the cheesy garlic bread from Lidl, for example, for like 40 pence. Whack that in the oven for a few minutes, and you have something that is very tasty, very savory, and would fill you up, or would be a great way to pad out, you know, a soup, a stew, anything else you were eating. And it's given me a real craving for garlic bread. Someone gave some slightly more fancy but still very affordable vibes with a sweet potato, like a baked or roasted sweet potato with chickpeas and feta, which just sounds lovely. Tinned or a jar of chickpeas is so cheap. I love chickpeas for that reason. Sweet potato, I don't know, is affordable everywhere, but definitely delicious and very nutritious too. And feta cheese, any kind of cheese involved there. I'm getting so hungry thinking about that one in particular. It sounds so good. But definitely a delicious budget option. Some people went for some sweet options. Someone just said cereal and milk. I guess that would probably depend on the cereal, because some cereals can be very, very expensive. Or I just go through them so quickly that it ends up being expensive because I make, you know, a 12 portion box, actually a 3-portion box. But cereal and milk is definitely a budget or pre-payday dinner, absolutely. Or someone else offered something a little bit, again, something that sounds a little bit more fancy, but is definitely very balanced and very affordable. Yogurt, like a kind of plain yogurt or Greek yogurt topped with peanut butter and chocolate. Delicious. Fabulous combination of flavors. Could be made as expensive as you like or as cheap and accessible as you like. Super, super balanced, full of protein, full of nutrients. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous combination. And the final things I want to mention here are some that I personally would have put forward, but other people mentioned them in the comments, replies, and messages too. The first one being risotto. An absolute classic, part of the kind of Italian culture of cucina povera. It's not an easy thing to cook perfectly. If you've ever watched any episodes of MasterChef, you'll know that. But it's so simple and so luxurious to eat when it's made well. Whether you make it with vegetables, whether you make it fairly plain and just kind of season it up with butter and cheese, it's so good. I love it with courgettes, even just a simple kind of cooking the rice with maybe half an onion and some butter and putting some really thinly sliced courgettes in there. It's also delicious made with tomatoes, made just with onion, frozen peas, and some kind of frozen or dried herbs in there with a little bit of cheese and butter is so fancy feeling and yet so cheap and filling. Any leftovers are fantastic with risotto, not necessarily to heat it up and eat it in the same kind of creamy fashion, but if you cook a risotto and you make a big batch, the following day, if you kind of take big scoops of the risotto and form it into little patties in your hands, you can then pan fry it in a little bit of olive oil to make like crispy rice cake things that I love doing anytime I cook risotto. I always try and make extra for leftovers, and it's so affordable. Soup and bread. I could not. If anyone has ever seen any of my What I Eat in a Day videos on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, anywhere, you'll know that soup and bread is a staple part of my diet. Basically, any day outside of the really hot summer months here in Italy, I am eating soup, and I'm eating it very happily. Soup made from tinned tomatoes, soup made from lentils, from potatoes, from any kinds of root vegetables, things that can stretch quite far, or from frozen vegetables such as peas. As long as you get some good seasoning in there and you make a big batch of it, it's fabulous. It makes so many portions, it can feed so many people, or you can have so many delicious leftovers to have in the fridge or to have in the freezer. Not everyone likes eating the same thing for 3 days, but if you're on a budget and you're trying to eat healthy and enjoy cooking and nice flavors at the same time, soup ticks every box, in my opinion. Plus, it's an excuse to eat a large amount of bread with your meal at the same time. Not that you need one. But soup, bread, and cheese makes me feel like a very well-fed medieval peasant, and I love it. I love it with any vegetable, whether it's creamy and thick or whether it's, a super kind of light and completely plant-based one. I adore it. If you want some soup recipe ideas, I actually did post a recipe video on my YouTube channel a few days ago, which has 3 kind of super simple, even if you're a total beginner cook, recipes for soup. Some tomato and pepper soup, there was a spiced lentil and vegetable soup, and a really gorgeous creamy potato soup with like crispy bacon or pancetta bits on top. Definitely worth checking out. Eggs of any sort were something that I didn't see mentioned too much throughout the comments and replies I got, but one that I would definitely recommend. Whether they're scrambled, poached, fried, boiled, eggs can be paired with so many things, and they're so filling. They're not as cheap as they used to be, but in terms of feeding, 1 or 2 people, they're such a fantastic option. Again, you can put just about anything into an omelette. You can put scrambled eggs on top of anything, or a fried egg, a poached egg, whatever your cooking ability is. Eggs are an amazing budget protein source, because meat is so pricey now and the cooking of meat is so particular that with eggs, you're in for a winner with so much less expense and stress, in my experience. And my ultimate and final mention that I would like to give in this this love letter to budget cooking is the peanut butter and jam sandwich. If the Americans have given us anything, sorry, that sounds so much worse than it meant to. If American cuisine has given us anything, it is the peanut butter and jam sandwich. Again, whether you're making it with the fanciest peanut butter jam and bread you can get your hands on, or the absolute cheapest options possible, this is filling, it is tasty, it is satisfying, and it's so cheap. You've got your bread there for your carbs. You've got your jam there for a little bit of sweetness, sometimes even a little bit of fiber, a little bit of nutrition from the fruit. And you've got a lovely, hopefully generous layer of salty peanut butter in there, giving you the protein, giving you the fat. It's perfectly balanced, sweet and salty at the same time. You can have it for breakfast, you can have it for lunch, you can have it as a snack. I have the most particular and food snobby Italian husband, right? He loves a peanut butter and jam sandwich beyond belief. Beyond belief. It's one of those things that until you're kind of initiated into the lifestyle, you might not get it. I'm obsessed. It's something I used to take all the time in like work lunch boxes because you also don't have to refrigerate it. You can have it sitting at room temperature for hours and hours and hours and it will not be a problem in the same way that meat or cheese or eggs or fish could be, you know? I'm a super fan. I'm obsessed, and I will always have those ingredients in my kitchen cupboards for making that very thing. At the moment, I've got some delicious raspberry jam in the cupboard, and I also have the dregs of a little bit of this kind of blueberry jam. I think it's blueberry jam. It's a slightly different fruity name here in Italy, but a kind of dark berry jam that with peanut butter on some any bread really is just, you know, whether it's soft or crunchy or toasted or just straight out of the bag is just one of my personal favorite things to eat. And to be honest, that would go well with saying a sandwich with peanut butter and apple slices or peanut butter and banana too. Both also delicious, satisfying, and nutritious options to have in your budget friendly recipe box, if you can call that a recipe. And with all that said, I am becoming somewhat ravenous and in need of cooking something. Personally, for dinner tonight, I'm going to be cooking something pretty budget friendly. I want to cook a big batch of rice to have some for today and for tomorrow for myself and for Francesco. I got some tofu on sale at my local supermarket and I want to cook that up with some leftover veg and some teriyaki sauce to have as dinner tonight and probably dinner tomorrow night too. And I'm getting very hungry thinking about it. So I'm going to love you and leave you there. Thank you guys so much, as always, for all of the input on all of these budget meals. Almost all of them are absolute 10 out of 10 in terms of flavor potential for me personally. I have had many, if not all of these meals at least once, both in terms of budget, you know, requirements and in terms of what I actually love eating. I kind of wanted to record this one after there's a book I've ordered that's just been released. It's called Cucina Povera, which I mentioned the term a bit earlier. And it's a book that I'm really looking forward to. It's been kind of on my wish list for a while. There's a great culture here in Italy for cooking and making do with what you have, you know, and trying to make delicious, filling meals out of it. And it's a style of cooking that I've always loved the flavors and techniques of. So it's one that I'm really looking forward to reading and being inspired by. And I felt kind of somewhat inspired to dedicate this episode to it too. So thank you guys again for your contributions. I hope you've either enjoyed feeling on and thinking about food or getting inspired by some of these options, whether it's what you want to cook tonight, whether it's what you want to eat sometime in the future, or something you need to go and buy some ingredients for, or just some ideas for what to do with what you already have in the kitchen or something you haven't eaten in a while. But that's all for this month. Thank you, as always, for your patience. Last month, or at least the last kind of 2 to 3 weeks, have been utterly insane in my life. So I do apologize for not being quite as on the ball with the podcast uploading as normal. And thank you so much to all the new listeners. There's been a little kind of spike throughout the month of March that I'm so grateful for. So thank you so much for being here. But I will love you and leave you to go and cook my own dinner. Thank you as always, and I will see you for the next one.